Hawks lose their fourth on the trot and Clarko's deflecting on an opposition star and the North Melbourne nightmare deepens. All that and more to come on the round so far. But Kane Corns, you were there at the Adelaide Oval tonight. St Kilda's second win in 5 days at the venue. They're in the third spot on the table and it all came down to the last quarter blitz.
Yeah, great performance from the Saints tonight, particularly late. They scored 5 goals to 0. Port Adelaide just the 2 solitary points in the last quarter. And this is how they did it done. That was a nightmare from Justin Westhoff, who was forced to play as a key defender tonight. Butler was accurate as always, but they were just good in the contest. That man there, Paddy Ryder, he had his best game for St Kilda. He was enormous. Only 10 disposals, but his influence in the ruck contest was huge. And haven't seen a goal like this before. Tom Jonas punching the ball onto the boot of Membry. We'll have a look at that. They went upstairs. That is a goal. That was a fluke, and that was the story of St Kilda's night, who were very, very good at Adelaide Oval.
The Power had the first 9 inside 50s of the third quarter and just couldn't bury the Saints. And as we know, that last quarter got them over the line. But as you mentioned, Paddy Ryder up against his old side and he put Peter Laddams to the sword, basically. Laddams is in with Lysett out of the side with a knee injury. Kanan, he would have enjoyed this on his old home patch.
Absolutely would. He lost his place after round 3 for the Saints and some questions whether they could play dual ruckman. But when he does this and when he goes forward also, I mean, he was the beneficiary of one free kick there, which was Tiki Touchwood, but he's working the centre bounce. I think right now he's probably the best tap ruckman from the centre bounce, which is so important. And it forced Brett Ratton to play Marshall forward, as we're seeing here, which worked. Like if Marshall can do this and score as well, and you get that dual threat, because they got nothing out of Membry, they got nothing out of King tonight, but it was these 2 dominant ruckmans who were genuinely the difference up against Laddams, who is only in game number 7.
And Marshall had 7 score involvements himself, 7 clearances, so he well and truly held up his end of the bargain. But how about their goal kicking? We've laughed at the Saints for years, Kane. They haven't been able to hit the side of a barn. This is the last 5 weeks, kicking perfectly, basically. And then if you look at the stat at the bottom, 49% last year. They're now best in the comp for accuracy in front of goal.
Well, it makes it easy, doesn't it? When you actually can go forward and score like they did tonight. So you're right, it's been an issue for them for so long, and they actually fixed it tonight. In perfect conditions, it must be said, at Adelaide Oval, but it genuinely was the difference. Kept them in the game, Port Adelaide inaccurate, missed some easy ones. Up the other end, the Saints couldn't miss.
Just on the Power quickly, a bit to worry about after this. Loss at home and, you know, a few doubts now creeping in. Who have they actually beaten?
I think that there will be some doubts, only because history would say that this is the point in the year where they've genuinely struggled and they lose against sides that they should beat. When you look at the ladder position at home for the first time in front of a big crowd in a long time, and then to serve that up. So there were some elements of the game that I liked. Their forward pressure was great, but there were some elements, including the midfield, which I really didn't like. So Robbie Gray was down tonight, hardly sighted. Travis Boak was quiet. Justin Westhoff, was dropped but got a late reprieve. So they've got some form issues with a number of their key players.
All right, well, we watch on the Power as to how they handle themselves over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Now to the SCG action-packed game, the Swans over the Hawks. It came down to this man, Tom Papley, 4 goals. The Hawks now 3 and 5 after losing their last 4 on the trot.
Yeah, well, he's the hottest forward in the game right now. Who would have thought, a player who's probably 5'10" leads the Coleman medal, and he was just in everything. I love his attitude. You see the dual free kicks there. Some would argue, including Alistair Clarkson, that it wasn't there, but I'd argue if for all he runs at you and he's got 18 kilos on you, which he does, it's always going to knock you over. Why do it? He'll make you pay. And he was just electric, and he's one of the most watchable players in the game right now. This goal here, this is what he's starting to make his name for. You can't let him get goal side. A couple of Hardwick's efforts today were poor, and once he gets goal side, good luck catching him. So he is a player who is in All-Australian form, and right now, lock him in for that All-Australian small forward spot.
Leading the Coleman medal by 3 goals. He's been the most targeted player inside 50 across the whole competition. Pick 9 couldn't get it done last year for the Blues. What's he worth right now?
Well, he's worth more than that, but he's contracted to the Swans, so I don't see there's really anything that they would give up to let him go. I actually think the Swans can bounce reasonably quickly. With the injuries that they've got, Heaney and Kennedy and Franklin, if they can get their full complement back, Hayward's also another one. I actually think they are a realistic chance to play finals next year. They won't be without Tom Papley, so under really not much circumstances, unless it was a ridiculous offer coming from Carlton, would I be letting him go if I was the Swans?
All right, more on the Swans in just a moment, but we have to look at this mini feud that's developed post-game. Alistair Clarkson, John Longmire had their differences over the journey. Clarko took aim at the Swans a couple of years ago and said they got away with blue murder. We was back at it again today and took exception to that double free kick you spoke about in regards to Tom Papley.
He milks a free kick as good as anyone in the competition. And he did so on this occasion again. So, it's you just wish they were consistently paid to everyone that gets knocked off the ball like that. There was probably 5 either side tonight and they pay 1.
Alistair Clarkson actually mentioned that he thought Papley milks a free kick as good as anyone in the comp. Do you have any view on that, or what would you say in response to something like that?
Alistair said that about Papley.
Yes, yep. Just a moment ago.
I don't know. Don't talk about opposition players and clubs.
Twice now in 3 weeks, Kane, he's been forced into one of these. It was Dimmer a few weeks ago. What do you make of it?
Well, I make of it that Alistair Clarkson he's almost been the master of deflection. And since he made those ridiculous comments that the state of the game was in a dreadful space, how has his side gone? Well, it's been deplorable. So Alistair Clarkson has a lot more issues on his plate than Tom Papley getting knocked over by a much bigger man after a goal was kicked. I would have thought the frustration would have been directed at his experienced player in Frawley and not at the hottest player in the competition right now, Tom Papley. So I actually think it's the loss that Hawthorn had to have to understand how bad they are going and how in need, a dire need they are to rebuild that football club, because they've been beaten by a Sydney side who was on average 2 years younger than them, with the players that I mentioned out of the side. What right would you give Sydney to win that game prior to the start of this game? Not much. So Hawthorn have got huge issues. Their older players are out of form. Their captain, Ben Stratton, is badly out of form, hasn't been cited. So he probably needs to lose his place in the side. Tom Scully's the same. You got Frawley. You got some others. You know, what to do with Sean Burgoyne? Is there any point playing the champion Sean Burgoyne moving forward? They've got to somehow get a lot of games into these young players. And is Clarko willing to do it? That'll be the question for him at the end of the year. But right now, along with North Melbourne and probably the Crows, they're the 3 teams that can't give a yelp this season.
And they've gone from the 3rd best defence to now 2nd worst in the competition, 17th in the competition. How about some of these names? O'Meara, Gunson, Smith, Shields, Scully, Wingard all went at 40% or worse by foot today. So they've got a bit to work on in that area. You mentioned Sean Burgoyne. Let's have a look at his incident with Paddy Dangerfield back in round 2. Now, this incident, Kane, he copped a fine for it. This had the rules changed, so it went from any sling tackle now to any dangerous tackle, essentially. This is the one that the AFL, in the post-mortem of this, suggested it probably should have been a week. Now, this happens today. Hits his shoulder first on the ground, but Sean Burgoyne's got to be careful with these.
Absolutely, he's got to be careful. He probably head did make contact with the ground at some point there, Rowbottom. So once the ball's gone, and it's hard for the player who's tackling because you can't see when the ball's gone, but it's that second action once the ball's gone to actually smash them into the ground. The AFL hate it. They've changed the rule for it. I'd be surprised if he got a week, but I think he gets a fine for that.
All right, massive game coming up next week. Hawthorn and Carlton, they both head over to the west, but it was the Blues getting the job done at the Gabba today. We've spoken about North Melbourne's errors in the front half, errors in the back half today. It was a bit of everything, plus some ill discipline thrown in.
Yeah, that one from McMillan was a nightmare. Cunningham on the end of this. Now, this one, look at the time. It's on 3/4 time. That's to put North Melbourne 1 point up with all the momentum going into 3/4 time, and Pittard comes in and does that. Now, it's probably the softest free kick we've seen all year. I hate the umpire playing it. I even hate it more that Murphy has dived for that and the look that that's created and how gullible the umpire was, but it didn't need it to happen. Polak coughs up that handball. He's got to be better than that, Jared Polak. You're going to pay him $800,000 at North on a 5-year contract. You can't be coughing up the ball in traffic like that. So that cost North Melbourne when they were really coming today. It would have been a devastating blow for the Blues to lose, having been so dominant in the first quarter. But for a Carlton side who have traditionally coughed up games like that in the last 3 or 4 years, they were good enough to hold on. That's all they needed to do after last week. Probably should have got the better of Port Adelaide. So they get the win, and that's the most important thing. But some key learnings to come out of it for the Blues again today.
Harry Mackay missed with a knee injury. Mitch McGovern will undergo scans for his hamstring, missed the second half, so a big watch on how they come up. Now back to Friday night. The Giants, backs against the wall during the week, entering at 3-4. Now, Kane, they're back to 4-4. It was on the back of this man. I know you love him. Take us through this one, Toby Green.
Oh, he's a genius. And he actually got a free kick, so well done to him for that. He kicked 5. It was just the genuine difference between the games. So, player of the round so far, but just so strong in the air and can go forward. And his temperament, I think, has really improved as well, Toby Green. So he was huge. He was clutch in front of goals, we're seeing. So they didn't get anything out of their tall forwards, the Giants. So Cameron is struggling a little bit to really dominate the competition. Finlayson is struggling as well. And Himmelberg shows glimpse. And I like Himmelberg as a player, but not doing enough. So just 2 goals between those 3 key forwards. And Leon Cameron would be breathing a sigh of relief that man, Toby Green, was as dominant as he was.
Interesting, after the game, Toby said he was a little bit annoyed to be rested last week. He would have liked Leon to throw him in, but he was fresh off the back of it. Do we now have to start talking about him top 3 players in the comp? Because he's kicked some, a few goals now against good sides this year. You look at some of his numbers, 4, 3 and 5 against Geelong, Collingwood and Richmond.
Let's hope he gets a good run at it. He is a little bit injury prone as his career's got on. But yeah, we're talking about a top 5 player in the competition, I would have thought. And I liked the Giants' attitude towards this one. And you look at the stats and people will say, well, they only generated 32 inside 50s. But they were dominant in the contest. And what I did like was their midfield getting back to what makes them great. Josh Kelly, 7 clearances. He had a lot of ground ball gets. Cornelio for the second week in a row put in a good performance. Whitfield was better, 26 disposals with that dash. And they're a much better side when Tim Taranto comes into the side, which led to this and these numbers. And when GWS have these numbers, they're extremely hard to beat. Plus 21 in ground ball, 17 in contested possession. They win the clearances and they out-tackle a very high-pressure side in Richmond. Now, they'd like to get those scores up. They'd like to be kicking 11, 12 goals a game and generating 40 to 45 inside 50s. If the midfield keep working like that, I think that will come.
Much like the Power in the third quarter tonight, Richmond had all the running in the second quarter and just couldn't bury the Giants. Now, back to Thursday night. The Dogs came. They almost feel like they're flying under the radar. They've won 5 of their last 6 games. They've snuck into the top 4, but I know they've had 3 losses by 6 goals or more, but they're just doing enough at the moment.
They are doing enough. They're in really good form, as you said, 5 out of their last 6. This is the last stages where they had some good and the Dogs doing enough just to do the right thing with 1 minute to go. Then they had some bad, and this would have been a disaster for Billy Gowers. He marks the ball with 40 seconds to go. Slow it down, Billy. Get some leadership. Go out wide. Play safe. He takes the riskiest kick in footy, a kick that you'd take if you were 10 points down with 2 minutes to go. And luckily, it was Marcus Bontempelli that saved the day for the Western Bulldogs. And then he knew exactly what to do. The captain, he took the time off the clock. And clearly, Luke Beveridge, you could lip read his mouth after the game. He was frustrated with Billy Gowers, but they did enough. No harm in what the Gold Coast did. They didn't lose any admirers. Once again, they're playing a great brand of footy, but Dogs are coming. A little bit worried about their forward line. I'm not sure they can rely on Josh Bruce as the key forward down there. He's had the one good game, Bruce, where he kicked 6. Apart from that, hasn't been cited for the year. And with Norton out, that would still be a concern for me.
Yeah, fingers crossed Norton can come back in the next 2 or 3 weeks and they can get him in the back half of the season. To the round ahead, Kane, 4 matches to come. The Bombers, they've got a few injuries mounting up now. Orazio Fantasia out with a calf injury, but can't wait for West Coast and Collingwood at Optus Stadium.
Danger game for the Bombers over there. Adelaide are going to have to win one at some point. Key injuries for Essendon. Game of the round, West Coast taking on Collingwood. Are the Eagles the real deal? And Melbourne, similarly, they're in good form, but as are the Lions. So a couple of cracking games there. And then you'd expect Geelong to be too strong for Fremantle, but with the injuries that they've got and Fremantle playing at home, that one's probably a 50-50 as well. 6
changes for the Cats. And Kane, we thought it wasn't going to happen again, but it looks like Mark Blitzarves might ruck again for Geelong. Their 2 ruckmen are out with injury. Henderson's come back into the side in defence, so Blitzarves may be shifted into the ruck. Now, the one more thing, we spoke about St Kilda's goal kicking. It's improved out of sight this year. Is this the reason? Quarter time, a new technique with the breathing.
Well, it's a game of 1%ers at the moment, isn't it? Look at this. 3 deep breaths before you break up and go out. So I don't know what's behind that. I don't mind it. It was all in unison. The players seem to embrace it, and it's working.
All right, maybe you can go and lay on the couch behind you and get a few deep breaths in before you head off to bed. See you
you,
same
Mitch.
time, same place here on the Round So Far next week, Kane.
See you later.